project for Merlot, which is an international repository of educational open resources. And today I'll be talking about a college-developed AI ethics guidelines that has been developed for K-12 teachers and librarians. So with that, so you probably have read the description. As you know, AI certainly requires a certain kind of literacy. And in fact, these days they're talking about AI being its own literacy amongst all the others. And if you heard the keynote today, you did hear some talk about ethics, which I think is a really important thing. So in that respect, the California State University Long Beach College of Education, which I've been affiliated, developed a series of guidelines for resources that, the idea is that it helps college students as learners, and also for them to think of themselves as teachers with their K-12 students. So in this case, we have a college committee, and I'll be talking about that. And I was the representative for the school librarian program. And so in this session, I'll be talking about how we developed these guidelines and how we distributed it, and then implications for you folks. So at this point, I think we're very cognizant that there's potential benefits and potential risks in AI in education. So you're seeing on, the top side, um, you know, content development, and it can help us with assessment and personalized education, that it can promote creativity and collaboration, and, the idea of work hard, smarter, but not harder. But on the other side, for those same, pieces, there are, those risks, as misinformation. I've done some work in that area. The issue of accountability, issues of privacy, the issues of over reliance, and certainly social bias. So all those things actually this whole page really deals with ethics, doesn't it, in terms of how we do, develop content and how we do assess, and how, creation does need to be, ethical, as well as, collaboration, et cetera. So it isn't just the bottom part in terms of ethics, but it's the whole, realm of how we do address AI, and especially, most recently we've been talking about generative, AI. So let's kind of continue this conversation. So here's the context. Again, been associated with the college education at CSU Long Beach for over 20 years. And we have probably the largest program for K-12 teacher preparation. And we are also one of 3 programs in the state to prepare teacher librarians, school librarians. So the university has been very concerned about AI, particularly about generative AI. And usually the first thought is students are going to cheat more. And so there actually is a committee that is discussing it, and they've basically been talking about, policies in terms of AI. But they also are somewhat cognizant of the fact that it depends, on what your subject is and what your learning outcomes are. Because again, we want to make sure that we are dealing with, knowledge about AI, the skills with using it, your attitudes, towards it. And I think that ethics is certainly part of all of that. So to that point, then, we have a existing technology committee, and it meets, at least once a semester. But we also did a subcommittee because, quite frankly, particularly as a teacher, librarian, educator, I was concerned about ethics, and not just don't cheat, but what's involved, and the responsibilities, the accountabilities, all of that kind of thing, and how people can use it ethically. And I think that's a premise that that librarians have in general. We tend to be the copyright police. We tend to be looking at students' work. Um, Teachers kind of almost rely on us to say, like, yeah, that's downloadable, that's fair use, or not. So the idea of ethics is certainly in our wheelhouse when it comes to dealing with AI. So brought up the subject in the technology committee. We had a subcommittee then to basically look at ethics. So what we decided to do was to create, guidelines for its use, and that we would have, two different versions of it. One for our own College of Education, students, and that also includes, the pre-service teacher librarians, as well as, the K-12 librarian, K-12 classroom teachers, and then also one for faculty. And that actually can play it in two ways. So it's sort of a preview for K-12 teachers on how to teach in their classroom in terms of AI and its ethics, but it's also for our own College of Education faculty, so that they have some guidelines, in its use, so that they can create procedures, expectations that are ethical for AI use. So as we, talked in this group, and again, I was, on that, the person in our college who helps teachers in terms of instructional design was on that. The department chair for teacher education was on that. And then a teacher in another college, but she teaches pre-service teachers that are going to become English teachers. So it was a nice mix of folks. And so our first thing was to say, like, so what should people know? Right. And this list right here pretty much covers what we thought should be done. So it's actually from ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education, specifically their book, Hands-on AI Projects for the Classroom Guide. So, the issues with AI, so the bias, the privacy concerns, algorithms, fairness, copyright, digital citizenship. Again, that's, in our wheelhouse, critical thinking and the societal impacts on AI. And again, a lot of this was discussed in the keynote. So I think this is, pretty standard. But I do want to add one more piece that also was brought up in the keynote. And this wasn't really heavily talked about in our committee, but the issue did arise. And that is the whole thing about accountability and the publication cycle. And that is, there are AI ethical issues throughout the whole publication cycle. And so this is my first piece that I want to say, like, how does this apply to teacher librarians? And that is, the more that we know how media, how AI is produced, and how it's disseminated, access to it and use of it, then the more discerning one can be, the more informed people can be in terms of its validity, its power, its impact, and their own participation and creation in this cycle. Because let's face it, this is basically an information cycle, right? So when we talk about AI and ethics, it's like the whole creation. So who is creating it, and what's their agenda? And we're talking all the way back to those folks that are creating algorithms for the companies that are then pulling out data through, from, throughout the internet. So, what is their aim in the product, and are they creating that product ethically? Right. So they have a responsibility. Everybody in this loop has a responsibility. It isn't like, oh, this is for the librarians. No, this is for everyone, right? And everyone in the school community, from your first students, to your parents, your men, your superintendents, to your community at large, throughout the whole world. Okay. So that when we're talking about then creating it, then there is an evaluation. And in that respect, it can play out two ways, but in this cycle, you could say that the algorithm is how and how it's developed and how that information then is synthesized, then becomes part of the evaluation, piece. So again, that's where you're seeing, some of those biases arise, partly because the data sets, are biased themselves because of, historically, who gets, on the internet, et cetera, gets posted. But also it's, how the algorithms develop and how, the developers have the machine quote, learn how to, pull out, select from those databases. So there's ethics there. And then the publishing of it. So again, um, how the interface of it, how it is, communicated, et cetera. And then the actual, dissemination, who's, how it's being, hosted, is it, and how it's, accessed. So in some cases it's quote free, other times you register, sometimes you have to, pay for it. So again, the access is on the user's side. And then, and again, if it's pay or they have the freemiums, so there's an equity issue in terms of access, right? And then you get to, the consumer side, so how are materials then, kept, and how are you using them, the reuse, repurposing, if you might say. So are you sharing with other folks? Are you using this just for brainstorming? Are you saying that this material is yours? Because if material is generated through AI, at least the United States government says it is not copyrightable. So you can see at every single step, there are ethical issues. And so if nothing else, if you can kind of point this out to students and that know that every single person, in that cycle is responsible. Okay. So I just, am pointing that out as part of, the guide, part of issues of AI use. So the guidelines that we actually developed, so there was a lot of, discussion in its development. These are what we decided to have as our topics. Start out with kind of, generic ethical use, including our own campuses, policies, what are unethical practices of it, just in general. And here we really look more at the production side. That is the companies that are providing these AI services, and then students' unethical uses and their consequences, and then encountering and counteracting unethical use. And here we had, recommendations for teachers. And then we also want to say this is just a black and white issue. There's a lot of things that, just as all information is contextual, so is ethical AI use contextual. So we have to think about linguistics. So, students who are English language learners or, learning whatever the dominant language is of your country, are there ways to make the text easier to read, for example, and how AI can help you on that? It depends on your subject matter. It can be different for science than it is, for philosophy, for example. Depends on the student's learning outcome. So what's the objective for the student? Is it to gain knowledge? Is it to know how to use AI? Is it to be able to, generate, content, to analyze it. All of those things basically can inform how you're going to use AI. And then the stages of learning. So you are just being introduced to the subject and you need some background information. Are you mastering it? Are you applying, et cetera? And then they want to make sure that we had some resources for folks as well. So I'm going to stop share for a second and just for a moment show you what that guideline is. So let me kind of stop share. Come on, we can do that. Sorry. You know what? I'm looking at the time and sorry again. On the bottom, you can see the URL for that guideline. If I have enough time, I will show that to you, but it's there and it's also, in the program's discussion thread, so you can see the link there. Sorry. So let's go to, the librarians. So as we were doing this, I said I also created then sort of a corollary to this guide, which then was, so I have to say, approved by the tech committee, approved by the College of Education, and it is posted in our college education repository of resources for all of our faculty to share with their students, because one of the guidelines is really directed to their own students, and the other one is more from the teacher's point of view. Right. So again, as a corollary, I created one then for school librarians. And again, as you heard in the keynote, this we tend to be, the ones to whom the new technology comes, right? And so we're used to doing this, whether it's been the internet or Wikipedia or social media, we kind of figure it out. So because we know that people are interested in it and students are likely to use it, so we need to be on top of our game, for it. I mean, let's face it, we are informational professionals. We are, educators. We're probably more educated than a lot of the people that are at K-12. You work with the whole school community and with other librarians. You work with all the students, you work with all the curriculum. We are the literacy magnets, right? Whether it's visual literacy, media literacy, digital literacy, et cetera. So there's different ways that we can, look at that. And we provide both formal and informal education. Every time the student asks for help, it's one-on-one or class or the whole school, we're there in order to help them to be able to advance in their information task. And again, in the library itself, it's a whole learning environment. So this is the place where students really can have more control, of their own learning. And we are facilitators on that. So this is just sort of a no-brainer. So you might as well pick up the reins, because let's face it, we should be indispensable. And so we need to be proactive, in this work. So in the guidelines for school librarians, I start out with just the generic ethical use, and then look at the AI tools and the ethical issues, for that. Again, identifying and counteracting unethical AI use, recommendations for teachers, and considerations. So it's it's just a one-off from the one that we did, in our college. So just some general thoughts on that. So how this applies. So, we need to be looking at different, AI tools, explore with them, seeing how they work. What are some of the ethical issues? Can we, look at how, the company's own, philosophies, in their use, how accurate are they? To what extent do they actually cite their sources? So that we can then make recommendations, to our school community. And particularly as we're looking at these materials, be able to say which ones seem to lend themselves to be more ethically viable. And also to, gather other resources about AI ethics so that folks can explore some of those issues. And again, I've been able to share the AI ethics guide. And then in terms, so it, I mean, we are resource people. So this is really resource based. And then of course, instruction, is to work with teachers, to work with students, work with administrators in terms of teaching with and about ethical AI, being able to take those AI skills as we are collaborating with teachers in doing learning activities to see where it makes sense for AI to be incorporated, and while we're doing that, to mention the ethical and unethical, purposes of it, and the consequences, and why you need to be responsible, for it. So, we're talking about several levels. So, whether it's in the classroom with teachers, whether it's kind of as a school thing for, professional development on their end, doing it with administrators, doing it during, parents' meetings. So there's lots of ways that we can be involved in it. I really like, this infographic. It kind of gives you some of the points, for ethical AI. So we're talking about fairness and reliability, transparency, privacy, inclusivity, accountability, oversight, and well-being. But I have the URL for this as well here. So, this could be just a nice little poster for folks just to see, and kind of keep that in their minds as part of that mindset. And in terms of research skills, again, this just plays right into what we've been doing before. It's just giving another dimension of it. So, when we're talking about, AI in terms of research skills, prompt engineering is our, search strategies. So now then let's add, the ethical dimension, of that. So is our information task ethical? Is how we are searching for it ethical? When we are, what are the phrases, that we are using? Are we also promoting certain negative, biases, as well? So are our questions being ethical? Then evaluating the sources. And so again, when we're thinking about AI, what are valuable, reputable sources, and being able to check, fact check, those materials that are produced from AI. So that, again, the ethics on that, of course, then is, looking at the validity of the information and where it comes from. But we're talking about, looking at, AI in terms of, reading it. Again, how valid is that? Looking at different sources. So using different AI, tools, also comparing them with other resources that aren't AI, generated. And again, the ethics of that is kind of looking at how are those, what kinds of perspectives are being presented, what voices are being heard, what voices aren't, where does AI play, into that. Summarizing, again, when we're looking at headlines and quotes and so forth. So AI also can be very good for summarizing and extracting. So again, taking the, the same material, for example, and then having different tools, then summarize it. How accurate, is it? To what extent then should students then compare their summarizing with AI, see what those differences are? All right, so that's part of the ethical thing. And then again, how they're using it to help them organize it. AI, for example, is very good in terms of outlining. And so we want to make sure then that, information that we're presenting, can be ethically organized. And so that, where's the brain power, that's involved in terms of organizing that information. And then, of course, then citing your sources. So, that's part of digital literacy, digital citizenship. Same thing with, AI. And I would suggest that the simplest method is just to have students say, did they use AI? What tools did they use? What process did they use in it? and their reflection on its use. So just being transparent about the process. And we know that when we're doing research, it's not just product that needs to be evaluated, it's the process, and it's the journey that's probably more important than goal. So in that journey, how ethical are we? How transparent are we in our use? So that's sort of the, again, kind of core things that we can do. So I have just a couple minutes, so I could actually share with you. The one for the students. So just a moment. But if you do have a question, I think you can unmute yourself. I'm going to just be opening. Sorry. There we go. Yeah, I know. Yeah, James, you really make a good point. The the companies aren't being transparent. We should, so why should we be? But again, it's sort of like, at least we need to model what we can do. Some things are in our control, some things aren't. I would suggest that maybe it would be smart for us to, this is it, here we go, to maybe, have a stock in that, become a stockholder and be in the meetings and help develop policy. That would be pretty proactive. We also should be, working with our legislators, please vote, folks, to make sure that legislators are part of the process and that they hold, companies accountable. So, think of what we can do, right? So here we are. This is the tool, so generic ways to use it, and some questionable ways to prevent. Very simple stuff, right? Recommendations for teachers, so you can share this with your teachers, and then considering, some of the context of how you're incorporating AI. And I have just a few, resources. Again, the teacher one is a little more, extensive. But at least this kind of gives you a nice, short, sweet start, with your folks. So with that, thank you very much. The time is over, and hope you have a good rest of the day or evening.